Well, I think we've got a quorum of people here ready to roll, so we're going to kick this off. Welcome everyone to Mitek's 2026 Fraud Forecast webinar. We are so excited to have you with us today. I'm Emily Seeberger, VP of Customer Success and Support at Mitek, and I'm honored to be both your host and moderator for today's event. I get to spend quite a bit of time with fraud risk leaders, and one thing I hear consistently is this: fraud does not tend to show up randomly. It shows when volume is high, customers are distracted, and teams are under pressure. So that's why today's session is all about the cycles and the predictable patterns fraudsters exploit year after year, and how teams can stay ahead without hurting real customers. So before we dig into all of that, I just want to start with a little housekeeping. First and foremost, we are recording today's session, so that will be sent out promptly after the session ends. Second, if you've got questions, there is a questions box. Please continue to put your questions there. There's also a chat box. Don't use that one. Use the question box. We'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. And then finally, we have an incredible lineup of panelists here with me today, who you probably are the reason why you joined. They come from various backgrounds and fraud lenses. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to them. I'm going to come around the horn. Candace, I'll start with you. Then we'll go to Rashira and then to Steve. But if each of you can just share your full name, your title, and a brief overview of your background, that would be fantastic. So Candace?
Hi, thanks, Emily. It's so great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Candace Levine. I lead our fraud prevention program at Morgan Stanley and E-Trade. So this covers both our wealth management clients as well as our E-Trade self-directed broker-dealer platform as well. I have a background in analytics, so I was a data scientist for many years before I joined the strategy team and started leading that. And before I joined fraud, actually, I used to be in Las Vegas doing behavioral analytics on the Las Vegas Strip. So I left the Strip and came to Wall Street, and now I perform analytics and build strategies for fraud patterns, which is just
very cool.
Best. Yeah, thank you.
Love it. Rashira.
Hi, this is Ruchira. I own the customer authentication platform for TD Bank, serving over 30 million customers across North America. My primary job is to protect the customers and their money and make sure that it's well taken care. My background is not as interesting as Candace on the Vegas Strip, but I think what drives my background and my current role is a variety of roles across payments, capital markets, trading, commercial assets, and most recently in Bank of America around AML and fraud. And then, of course, today it's customer authentication. So, life is a full circle here.
Wonderful. And Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Schwade, and I am the Senior Manager responsible for fraud deterrence and vendor governance here at Verizon, particularly in the wireless side of the house, dealing with handset theft. I've had on and off experience in fraud for the last, 10 years here and 30 years. I've actually started out in asset recovery for one of Bank of America's older institutions, Fleet Bank, back in the day when they were still a viable entity. In addition, I'm also the president of the Communications Fraud Control Association, hosting or co-hosting, I should say, the handset trafficking task force, and get into all of the behaviors there at some point later down the road. But I'm also a multiple patent holder for device attestation and customer attestation as well. So I'm very familiar with all of the methods that we see here in the telecom world and what we do to fight them. So glad to be here and glad to work with Mitek on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Well, we are thankful that each of you are here. And now that we've met our panelists, I want to talk briefly to the audience about how we're going to spend the next hour together with each other. So we're going to go through why seasonality and fraud matters and how to spot it early. Then we'll talk about how teams best prepare before fraud season and volume spikes. Next, how to respond effectively when a spike hits. And finally, what leaders should be thinking about as we look to 2026. So to just level set the stage for everyone, I do want to talk about what do we mean by seasonal fraud. So when we talk about seasons here, we're not talking about the winter, spring, summer, fall seasons. We're talking seasonal frauds follow predictable patterns. So these are cycles such as new device launches, tax season, school enrollment, travel, holidays. Fraudsters are tracking the exact same calendars we do and our customers do. And so when that customer volume increases, fraud is blending in, and that's where the risk lies. So if I could just ask each of the panelists in 1 or 2 sentences, what fraud season or fraud cycle do you most watch closely? Steve, can I start with you?
Well, the holiday season is always a big one for us, with phones being gifts that people will give and upgrade for. But it's also, believe it or not, graduation season. That's one that most people don't think about, because
Oh,
as
interesting.
students are moving on from high school to college, maybe upgrading a phone is something. So we do have periodic cycles like that.
Nice. Rashira?
I think from the banking side, every season has different flavors. Particularly the holiday season, as you know, is more about gifting. So you have a lot of charity, scams that happen. So you have online shopping. You have a lot of travel season during the summer when kids are off from school. So you have travel scams and travel fraud happening at that time. And then also, I would say Q1 in particular, because of the employment scams. Those are most of the times where companies have financial organizations, opening up in terms of new job recruitments, money movement happening. So I would say pretty much from November to summer in spikes is how we look at seasonal fraud.
Great. And Candace?
Well, all of those resonate with me as well. What I will add from our E-Trade perspective, which is that self-directed trading platform, we are prepared every single Friday because options expire on Fridays. And so you see more trading fraud. And then especially if the end of the month or the end of the quarter is a Friday, we are like all hands on deck. We just know they're hiding in all of these patterns. They're trying to get this options fraud through. And so they can hide in those larger volume times where more options are expiring and coming to market. So it's definitely one where we're just watching the calendar. The other one I'll add is we work really, really closely with our marketing partners here. So marketing lets us know, hey, we're going to be sending out this campaign, trying to acquire new business, and we're able to watch and monitor our new account opening metrics and dashboards to see if there's any seasonal spikes that we're actually bringing because we're marketing and bringing more attention to the firm.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's double click on this a little bit. How can organizations identify their own unique fraud seasons and recurring risk cycles? Steve, can I start with you?
Sure. Look, we have to look at promos, and promos are always being gamed. So someone trading in a device, or trying to take advantage of no money down situations, or finance, anything of that nature, you really need to watch what's going on. And it's all historical. It's all trending for us. We know that, for example, if a new promotion is being offered, we're going to see an increase in fraud by X%, because if we say and I'm making it up, let's say that we're not collecting sales tax, we're making it a sales tax free promotion, they're going to jump on that as well, because it's one less element that a fraudster has to come up with to be able to make a purchase. So
Yeah.
maybe they're not going to have to come up with a stolen credit card, or something of that to that effect. So that's where it all starts. But we have a very, very tight monitoring process. We look at the number of hits that we'll have with a product like Mitek, how often we're running things through, to see what the volumes look like, and we'll compare year over year, or year over multiple years, as well as month over month or multiple months. So that's how we start our forecasting. Then on top of that, it's just common sense.
Yep. Candace, anything that you would add that's different than what Steve hit on?
I'll just double click. I mean, the marketing seems to be resonating with both of us, which is we're very closely tied, again, like I said, to our marketing partners. So they'll let us know well in advance if they're planning something, sort of what segments they're looking, which products specifically. For us, it's going to be that checking account that is the riskiest product for us because it has the most money movement capabilities. So anytime that they come in, you're going to be pushing up the checking exercise a little bit more awareness, not only just with us in our controls, but also preparing our operational teams as well. Sometimes those marketing products like Zelle. And so when we have these different things being specifically marketed out, that's where we really know to focus our efforts, make sure our rules are in the exact right place, and also make sure the operations is staffed and things are being prioritized accordingly.
Got it.
Yeah,
and Rashira, Rashira,
yeah,
I was going to jump to you, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, similar to what Candice said, I think for us, because of the entire platform, offering multiple products, the commercial and the consumer lens has different flavors of fraud. On the commercial side, we typically see more of the mortgage fraud, that is happening where you have small businesses and you're giving them loans. So it becomes very important to understand what is the company that is coming in at your door, how are they interacting with us, what money movement is happening. So again, going back to what Candice said, the payments rail in general, both across Cash App, Zelle, wire transfers, the purchase of large goods, the credit card usage, like it's so much across different products that it's hard to narrow down on one. But I think any money movement requires higher level of assurance, and we are monitoring that very closely, be it trading activity, be it purchase and sales, be it payments out. And then also, what is a recent trend we are noticing, and I think, thankful to Mitek to have introduced document verification, is mule account opening and synthetic fraud. How can we catch the fraudster early on, knowing that they will bring in fake IDs to be able to open an account? And once you've opened an account, it becomes hard to track them.
100%. So I wanna kind of move us then forward. So talking more about the proactive preparation. So once teams better understand what their fraud seasons and cycles are, it's really now the question of how can they best prepare for this? So for anybody online who is wanting to better operationalize proactive preparation, so what might be the best way for them to go about bringing that prep and awareness across teams, controls, and systems? Thoughts on that?
I can take
I'll
that.
jump in.
Um,
Oh, go
oh,
ahead,
sorry.
Ruchira. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think there are two ways of combating that. One is of course the customer side, and then the other is us as a bank and a platform that tries to mitigate the risk. So from a customer side, we try to run these awareness campaigns. Education, education, education. As much as you think it's normal, it's boring, but when you see something, say something. You learn that in school also. The same applies even at the workforce or even at the customer level. So we run specific targeted campaigns around new product launches, around seasonal fraud. We also educate our customers to be skeptical, to pause. If anybody's calling you to send money out, you need to think, you need to ask the why, and then also verify that independently. So what I mean by that is go to the company defined websites, go to the company defined apps. Do not have third party intermediaries who are basically enabling smishing, phishing, and you get the money out. So it's always advisory to go to the source of truth, and make
Yep.
sure you verify your transactions independently, verify your asks independently. I would also think about how personal information is shared. Nobody's asking you for personal information. That's a general protocol or a rule of thumb. No giving SSNs out, no giving phone numbers out. And then, of course, lastly, creating urgency. Any urgent money ask, especially around elderly people, wanting to give their Christmas gifts to their grandchildren. Like those are things that are always, again, watch list. Never is there an urgency for money. You need to pause and protect yourself.
Ooh, great tips. I love that. And Steve, what were you going to try to add in there too?
Well, in addition to stress testing our systems, anything that we can. Remember, there's so many interactions with our customer service reps as well as our stores and our indirect agents. But we also have our digital channels as well. So we stress test and we look at our models and we refine our models and we tune those models, and then we tune them up and down, because what's the tolerance for risk this time of year? It's probably lower than any other time of year, but while that's occurring, you also have a need for us to, in our case, it's about gross adds, it's subscriber growth, right? So you
Yep.
don't want to turn away a good customer. So there's that constant adjustment of friction and the stress testing of systems to make sure that we've got it all right, and the layering of our tools. So not only is it something like ID verification, maybe it's looking for synthetic IDs with another vendor or something else. And how many times do you have a cocktail approach going on where you've got 4 or 5 different elements in the recipe, and the next thing you know, one piece breaks? What happens? What's the fallout? So fortunately, my team and I are not involved with that, but I know that my coworkers are very involved in that.
Got it. Candice, anything additionally you would add around helping teams better operationalize these types of motions?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, we set up these task force essentially, and each person has a very specific role that they play. If we know something is coming, something seasonal, I'll come back to my trading fraud example on Fridays, for example. The task force is assembled. They know exactly what metrics they're looking at to know if something is wrong. They know exactly who to escalate to. We set up dominoes. The first person knows when they need to knock over into the next person, and the whole thing goes. And that's that escalation path that we've set up. So there's no questioning, there's no room for, should I say something? I don't know. That's defined and easy to follow for anyone operationally to know if something is off. And that's been super huge. And then taking that one step further is it can't just happen within fraud in isolation. So what we learned was even though our trading order room, which is the team that reviews trades before they actually place, without them being bought in that trading fraud is bad and we're all held accountable to it, there were things that they were accepting without thinking of fraud red flags at all. That wasn't part of their role. And by training them and bringing them in and saying, okay, you are a part of this whole mission and about this being successful, then they're bought in. Now they're looking for it. It's one of our best lines of defense. They're not even held accountable to that, but they just want to stop fraud. And now they know what to look for. They can do it. And so they're part of that whole domino operation that we've set up. And so it's just expanding it past just being within fraud and making sure we're operationalizing it cross-functionally as well.
I love that. Oh, those were great. Go ahead, Rashira, please.
Yeah, to add to what Candice said, totally echo that sentiment around baselining and observability, right? Steve also kind of alluded towards it, knowing what normal looks like, be it a particular day of the week or be it a particular month of the year, and your product usage by your customers, right? All of those things give you an indication or an early indication of what normal is in your transactions. So when you see that spike at a particular time, or you see that volume increase, you need to take a pause and think of the why, and then baselining those normal with layered controls, with increased monitoring, with segregation of duties, so that the same person is not looking at the same thing versus you have a new set of eyes. You have companies running furloughs, for example, right? You have the person going in for 3 weeks because a new set of eyes comes in and is looking at the same data with a different lens. So I think all of those things are intentional steps that are taken very mindfully to make sure that the data is looked very closely. I would also say mock drill sessions is something that we do so that we know that when there is an incident or when there is a high alert, how do you tie that to the reaction of the individuals as well as the systems. And then last but not the least, specifically talking about customer authentication and fraud, we do adaptive verification based on risk assessment. So when we see that there's an alert, workflow that is increased, or we see that a customer is behaving in a different way than normal, which is anomaly, we are our systems enabled, ready to step up the customer so that we can lock the front door right away. We can prevent the fraud versus reacting to the fraud in a mitigation process.
Love it. So I think we listed some really, yeah, go ahead, Steve,
I think I'll come back and just kind of give a current event. Not everything is a one-step process or a one checkpoint sort of evaluation. Currently, I had one instance this morning, and it probably lasted about half an hour. We saw a huge anomaly in terms of the spikes that we're seeing in consumption of one particular vendor's data over the past 10 days. And we're attributing it to a number of factors. So you have things like promotional offerings or sales, as well as fraud attacks. So when you get a combined attack, now you're trying to separate the wheat from the chaff and try and figure out what is real, what has to be addressed, how do you attend to it? And to your point earlier, how did the fraudsters kind of slipstream in to the work that we've got going on? It's always problematic, and there's always going to be something that comes up behind you and bites you on the backside because you didn't expect it or you weren't looking for it. You can't be looking with the 360-degree view all the time.
Yeah, no, these are great tips. So I'm a girl that loves a checklist, and I think you guys all listed some items. So if we were to give for the people on the call some sort of effective preseason checklist of how they can best prepare, I think we hit on some of these. Like Rashir, you talked about education. We talked about creating maybe a task force. We talked about knowing what your normal is, and what would be maybe some of those other big, like here are the big 1 to 3 items that you would say this is a good starting point for a checklist for anybody on the call?
Stress testing.
Stress testing.
Stress testing systems, making sure that they're going to handle increases in volumes, because when an attack occurs, it's not going to be onesie twosies and slipstream in the back door. It's going to be big, broad, and it's going to be like trying to move an 18-wheeler through a regular front door of a house.
Great. Anything or share, Candace, you guys would add to that checklist?
Yeah, I can add. My biggest thing is performing root cause analysis after a big event. You cannot just stop the bleeding and move on with your life. You need to know exactly what failed, why it failed, what's on your roadmap that would eventually answer this problem. And you constantly have to be tracking that and adding that to your business case as to why you need funding, why you need more controls, why you need prioritization from tech. So at the end, maybe you're doing all of these things in the moment, that's great, but the real work comes after the bleeding has stopped, and where you really form that into insights into how can I make sure this never happens again. The seasonality we can't change. They're going to keep hitting us, but it's all about strengthening the defenses. And if you don't know what your problems are, you'll never be able to strengthen. You'll only be able to respond. So that's the biggest one I would put on the checklist.
Ooh, that's a great one.
Yeah, and I think I align with Candice on that one because what happens once may not happen the second time. So continuous learning is key here, and learning from your mistakes or learning from what could have been done better. It's called the retrospective sessions that we do in terms of what happened that we cannot now repeat because that has become business as usual. And what's emerging is what you're looking towards always. So you'll always be surprised in the fraud space, which also is a good thing sometimes because you're on your toes. But technology, people, and process, right? All the three have to be tightened in different ways. So, for example, you're combating emerging threats, technology will come into play. When you're combating something that is a process problem, segregation of duties, understanding what each person's role is, how do they react, what is the response time, is the second one. Also scaling, to Steve's point, making sure you do performance testing, your peak volumes during seasonal fraud items. Is your technology scaling up to combat those? Are you making sure that you're not stopping the customer to do the online activity, for example, because of the issues? That's the second. And then people, when I say people, it's also insider stuff, right? You may have people or rogues sitting in your organization who are actually bypassing controls. So how are you also monitoring them is also key. So I would say a combination of deep dive around root cause analysis, people, process, tech.
Love it. So, Steve, you brought up the concept of the dreaded F word, friction. So how should
Oh,
one think about friction? I know I kind of fooled you there, right? You didn't know where I was going. How should one think about friction with customers during these periods? And what do we think is an acceptable amount of friction when risk rises?
well, I think that it's a great question. First off, the level of friction varies depending on what you want to do. The amount of friction required to purchase, say, an older transaction like making a deposit into someone's, checking account or a 529 account differs from someone buying 5 cell phones that are worth $1,200 a piece. It's a different financial value. And in the case of Morgan Stanley, if someone wants to transfer or put $100,000 into a 401 or move it from one account to another, that's a lot of friction that I would want there, and I would want that. I've become a big fan of friction. If you want to put a little alliteration on it, but quite honestly, I think that consumers don't always want friction; they want safety. And if you do it properly and you ask for things like, maybe you need to visit a branch because there's a risk or a concern for a California customer whose IP address is showing up in New York or something along those lines. Ask somebody to show up for ID and explain the friction. So I think that it's really going to be relevant to the transaction, and you're going to need to be able to kind of scale that. Someone gets online and wants 7 iPhone 17 Pro Maxes with 2 terabytes of storage, and they've got some questionable, limited number of trade lines. I want them to come to the store. I want to see an ID. I might ask for a second form of ID because I'm not going to trust that driver's license that they've got it may be good, it may be legit, but it may be to Candace's point. You may have a mule. You might have a mule on your hands, and they're not going to want to walk in the store. Maybe that's the friction that I need to drive that mule out. So yeah, it's all going to be dependent upon the value of the transaction.
Thank you. Rashira, Candace, anything that you guys would add about friction?
I mean, I
will
think,
say,
yeah, sorry, Candice, go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback on Steve bringing up branches. Branches are not available to us on the E-Trade side. We don't actually have any. And so our options for friction get a little bit limited. I can only put digital friction into a digital experience. So I have to be really intelligent about what friction and where I place it, because a very, very savvy fraudster might actually be enabled by certain things that are a hindrance to others. If our clients are the only ones who are getting friction from this, but it's a mule, so they'll pass IDV with no problem, but it's just turning legitimate clients away who weren't as tied to the account opening process to begin with, then that's not a great trade-off for me. The IDV has actually been just a huge enabler for us overall at account opening, particularly with the liveness, because to Steve's point, that's the closest I can get to you walking into a branch. That's where I'm going to actually capture your face and make sure you are who you say you are. So for me, I have to really make sure I'm using intelligent and digital friction that can actually make sense and that our clients can have a pathway forward, because there's no fallback of, okay, just come into a branch. So we have to be pretty choosy in how we place it and where, and make sure we're able to justify that with data back to the business to say, this is the right friction that we're putting in here.
Great. Rashira?
Yeah, and I think it's very important to understand the customer journey and the persona of the customer before inserting or solving for the friction that the customer may have. Money in situations where a customer is actually trying to open an account, fund the account, buy a card. Those are situations where understanding the digital customer's behavior, understanding how fast they want the product. Is a part that I would say that the product organizations, the marketing guys do a good job. So it's again learning from what they've seen as strengths. That friction can be solved by simplified user designs, asking for effective information, not too much information to get started, because the risk of money in or new product is less. But when you're doing money out, which is basically on the payment rails, customer friction is actually good because it ties with the safety of the customer, right? And I think you can solve for that by targeted education of the customer. Most of the time, what we've seen is the customer will not resist friction or hesitate to give you additional information because they know you're trying to be safe, you're trying to keep their money safe. So it again comes back to education, awareness, and making sure that you use technology the right way. If, for example, if you're using an ID, can you not pre-fill the information that is on the ID versus asking the customer to again type the same information, first name, last name, date of birth? So a blend of technology with knowing that if you were the customer comes first, how would you expect the system to behave, ties to reducing customer friction.
Ooh, great thoughts, guys. I love it. So we talked a lot about having this preparation, this checklist, all the things around education, knowing what normal is. So love all that. But even the best prepared teams are going to see spikes. So I really want to dig in now to how do people best respond when these types of events happen, because they're going to happen. So if anybody wants to kind of share, when a spike hits, what are the first 1 to 3 actions a fraud team should take within 24 to 48 hours of an event happening?
All right, I've got mine. I'll go first. Great. Step 1, escalate. Get the right people on the phone, get the right people aware. That's step 1. Step 2, start pulling data. You need a person in there who can pull data, who can tell you how big your problem is. You might know you have a problem, you don't know how big it is. You need the data to tell you that. Step 3, think tactical, stop the bleeding. You can't get strategic until you're out of the chaos. And so you stop the bleeding. Those are the 3 steps in the first 48 hours. And then it goes back to what I said, which is like step 4 is debrief with your subject matter experts. Step 5 is socialize to the people who make decisions, who control funding, who control all of the things that come next. But the first 3, escalate, data, stop the bleeding. Get something
I got those down, Candace. I like those 3. Those are great. Steve, I think you were going to have a thought on that too. Any different steps you would have than Candace?
No, and actually, we just have slightly different names. I mean, when it's escalation, hopefully I don't have to escalate. Hopefully I'm going right to the right people and collaborating. So I'll change my term from escalate to collaborate. But having data to do the root cause analysis and then shutting the valve, making sure that you triage whatever's going on so that you can stop the bleeding and figure out what you have to do for either a short or long-term fix. Having a gap that continues to bleed out money on us is going to be a problem for me or any of us on the panel today. We all have to go and figure a way to shut things down and here's the hard part, without stopping commerce. If you're going to stop commerce, you're going to have somebody screaming at you that you are not doing what the business needs, especially right now. We're in the home stretch for the fourth quarter and for the year-end performance. Everybody wants the number of accounts they open, the number of subscribers, the number of transactions or funded 401s. We all want them to be, maxed out, and so that our year-end performance is there. So you have to be uber sensitive to that. But yeah, it's that whole idea of collaborating, doing the root cause analysis, and shutting the valve, stopping the bleeding.
Great. Rashira, anything
Yeah, I
different in
think
the list?
Yeah, I think Candice touched on that a little bit. I think the first thing, of course, in our world, we call it detection. So how did you detect it, right? Whether it was a phone call coming from a customer in a panic mode, whether it was your system's alerts generating, however you detected it. Once you detected, immediate analysis. So how fast can you analyze what went wrong? Where did the breakdown happen in the entire end-to-end process? Was it at the customer side or was it at your side of the house? Next would be, I would say, containment. How fast can you contain the exposure? That is immediately trying to reduce the impact of the issue. Then further on, I would say recovery and restoration, right? How fast can I recover from this? Whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours, couple of hours. That would be, again, I think each of the organizations typically have playbooks telling you, how do you rate that incident? How do you go ahead and solve for it fast? And then most important, again, Candice has mentioned this in the past, is post-incident recovery, right? Or post-incident review. How do you learn from this so that you can tighten your control further and revisit any thresholds, any models, any analytics, so that you're not letting this happen again?
Great. And Candice, somebody had asked what the fifth step of yours was, and I believe it was socialize. So I think it was escalate, data, tactical, stop the bleeding, debrief, and socialize. Did I get those right? Okay.
Nailed it.
So there we go.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I like all your lists. I think you all made excellent points. Now, if I'm somebody on the line and I'm trying to figure out, okay, I've got my list. Now, how do I actually coordinate this across all my different groups? I've got maybe a fraud team, a digital team, a customer experience team, a support and operations group. How are you coordinating all of these efforts when a live fraud event is happening so customers actually aren't impacted more than we need? Thoughts on that?
It might be setting up a command center. It might be as simple as just making 2 or 3 phone calls, getting people to hop on a WebEx. It might be having to get the folks a fraud decisioning engine, getting them there and getting their input. What are they seeing? They're the ones coordinating and seeing where the alarms are firing. So we may be asking them to engage, but it's typically going to be setting up that command center on the fly, and it might just be 4 people jumping on a WebEx. But that's where you have to start. Now, do we open up an incident with our cybersecurity team? Maybe. It all depends on the severity of what we see that's going on.
And I
Got
think
it.
See a lot of head nodding, so I think we all have the same manual and the same playbook in that respect.
Yeah, what Steve said already echoes, because we have something called the Fusion Center. This is their primary job, eyes on deck, eyes on the glass pane, if I will, globally monitoring all such incidents. What we typically do is based on the severity. That's the first thing you do, right? Based on the analysis, you assign a severity of the incident, and then you start getting teams together through a command center or an open line that is next open for 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is, and everybody jumps out based on what role they play in that whole situation. The analytics team, for example, could be real time. It could be introducing policies, tightening the policies. Everything is happening real time as you speak, and folks learning with more and more information coming in. And I think the most important that I feel in such situations is keeping the business, keeping the leadership, and our customers informed. So
Yep.
you divide and conquer. Some of the call center folks may just pick up the phone and call the customer and say, "Hey, we got you. We are shutting this line down, but we are here to give you business the alternative way, walk into a store." Or, for example, it could be your own leadership, pulling in the plugs in terms of escalations, overrides, because now you're putting an emergency fix into the code to be able to stop that bleeding. So multiple roles kick in, and it's
Yep.
just tying that thread together on our side of the house through an incident manager.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've got a question hot off from the audience, and it's this. As things stand, our fraudsters are one step ahead, and are we striving to be always one step behind? How will AI technology impact fraud detection and protection?
I can start if you'd like.
Let's go.
So for the past 15 years, Verizon has been using what we previously termed machine learning to power our fraud decision engine, and it's been constantly evolving. AI is nothing that's new to us, and it's being used to harness those multiple alarms that we see going on through our models to be able to go ahead and detect fraud. So it's already something that we're doing today. We're not just waiting for one alarm to fire to go ahead and do something. We're looking at 5 to 7 to 15, depending on what type of transaction we're looking at, what channel it comes through, and so forth. But it's something that we're already using, and it's going to continue to be used.
Great. Other thoughts from Candace or Shira?
Technology solves for both sides of of this problem, right? Fraudsters are getting sophisticated. They use technology to scale, to cut across boundaries and geographies. And we also have to use technology. So I think the key piece that is always challenging is how fast can you leverage technology to solve for the problem. You have deep fakes, you have AI generated attacks, you have voice cloning, all of that stuff that is happening. The challenge is always to develop and improve your technology to combat fraud. Now, sometimes in organizational bureaucracy that may be hard, because by the time you solve for it, right, it's already over and the next trend comes on the corner, and they need to get it right once. We need to get it right every time. That's where layered defense comes into play. And also, when I say layered defense, it's people, process, and tech multiplied together to combat the changes that are happening around us.
Great. Candace, anything you would add?
I think it was covered well. The gripe that you'll hear from any fraud professional who's trying to leverage AI technology is all of the governance around it within the firm. We have to be responsible with how we use AI. Our fraudster organizations don't have the same level of standard and responsibility in how they conduct their business. So there's always going to be that challenge. It doesn't mean that that's the wrong thing. It's the right thing for the firms to do to be responsible. But what it does mean is we can't always fight fire with fire necessarily. We're going to have to make things that are sustainable and that can work, that don't have this huge burden of all of the governance that goes with it. And so that's sort of the challenge we're working through on our side, being a very risk adverse firm and all of these things, and making sure that we're just deploying things that we know work, that are going to be sustainable and are worth the governance around it. I do think that there's a fair question about, are we one step behind? I think just the nature of that is we're not going to have the leading thing in deepfake detection. It's going to take time for us to catch up. And once we do, it'll be really effective and sustainable. But there's going to be some period of time where deepfake might get through. And we just kind of have to accept that as the part and the structure that we work within.
Great, thank you.
Candace, I'm going to tag on to one piece.
Please.
Talk about governance, but one of the things that we haven't really touched base on here is the regulatory restrictions that we have and that our attorneys give us when it comes to privacy of personal information. Metrics. It's always a constant. How long can you keep data for? So it's a restricted data set that is going to be a problem in the future, because now if I've seen Emily's driver's license show up, say today, and I can only keep that information for 90 days, and you show up in 91 days, you're recycling every quarter that same information that's out there. And if AI can't have that information to retain and learn, how are we going to be able to detect things like Emily showing up every 91 days? So
Yep.
it creates a frequency in which the fraudster can penetrate into our systems or penetrate our systems just by waiting. And I think that what has to happen is going to be a need for us to change some of those regulations. While we balance the needs for the privacy of our consumers out there, we need to keep some of the information and figure out how we're going to store it in such a way that the regulators are going to say, okay, keep it for, and I'm making it up, a year
Yeah.
or 2 years, whatever it may be. And I think Candace
Yeah.
and Rashira, I see them nodding their heads, so I think they're in agreement that that's probably one of the biggest
Absolutely.
challenges.
The regulatory pressure is a big one, and I think that's where we on the serving side always have a disadvantage, because you're trying to meet the regulations, and then you are ring fenced with what you can do, be it legal and privacy both, and that's why I said it's sometimes hard to bring technology inside as fast as you would like to. But having said that, I feel also where we could improve collectively as a community is information sharing, right?
Yeah.
So if you see a trend that is happening across Singapore, or you will notice there are certain, and people who are in fraud know this very well. There are certain pockets in the world where that the trend is seen before it comes to the rest of the world, right? Asia, for example, is much faster both in terms of detection as well as in terms of fraud. And then you pick from those, you learn from those areas, and then you bring them home, going back to the root cause analysis, and then say, do I have an open vulnerability? Do I have fraud exposure, knowing that this is coming? And
Yep.
once you see that, that's where you start tightening the control, because it hasn't hit your population yet. So that I feel is a big way of learning. And you have FSI SAC, you have all these multiple forums, and vendors also are now doing this, giving us information that is shareable across our organizations, to start getting to know those trends even before they are hitting, because the data is always telling a story. How you use the data is always something that we need to improve on, where you use AI tools to scout the data, you use agentic AI coming in now. Again, AI is there. How you use it along with information sharing is the key.
I love that. And you are segueing us beautifully, Rashira, into our last area, which is really looking ahead, forecasting into 2026. So we know the tactics are changing, the scale is changing, but our expectations from our customers are not going down. So what do we think are the most emerging trends around fraud that we expect to accelerate in 2026?
I can start with one. Yeah, I think, and speaking just from my organization, we've gotten really good at tightening and getting security around the front door, but our clients have the key to the front door, and if they're giving that key up to bad actors without knowing it, it doesn't matter how good my lock is on the front door, right? So that the biggest thing that I'm really worried about is the level of sophistication in social engineering, where people can't really tell what's reality and what isn't anymore, and they think that they're having conversations with our organization and they're not, or they think they're talking to their advisor and they're not. These are things that really, really scare me. And it won't be that the account is getting hacked. It will be that our clients are the port of entry, and they're doing so without knowing. And so how can I build a strategy and build controls around that? And how can I build my messaging so that our clients know when they are being socially engineered and when something seems off versus when something is totally legitimate and we do need to confirm it with them?
That's great insight. Steve or Shira, thoughts on trends we expect to see in 2026 around fraud?
I think
So
oh, go ahead, Steve.
go ahead, Rashira. No,
Okay.
please go ahead.
I think from our side, it's of course everything that is AI-driven phishing, AI-driven social engineering, deep fakes, whether it's voice deep fakes, whether it's document verification deep fakes, ID proofing in particular, know your customer, KYC. Those are areas where, deep fake and AI-generated documents are kicking in, right? So how do we combat that? Secondly, synthetic ID, right? How do you, again, come back and identify the person ahead of time to know he who says he or she is? So that is, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier in the panel here, how do you make sure that the good customer comes in, the good customer comes in clean, and how do you then also make sure that they are served better with minimum friction? Um, it's very interesting to see that whole aspect of ID proofing strengthening and authentication strengthening, which is where SIAM has picked up quite a bit of the lift in terms of locking the front door. But to Candice's point, you can only lock the door as long as you know what you are locking it with. Secondly, I would say cryptocurrencies. The emerging trend is around cryptocurrencies. So the more digital the customer is getting, the more mobile phones they are using, the more they are not doing physical interactions with a banker in the store. You have to now make sure you don't know who the person is. You don't know the persona of the customer behind the browser or behind the mobile. So that becomes very important for us to understand the true customer with the best knowledge. It's moving from probabilistic to deterministic. And then lastly, different money movements in terms of, like I said, Zelle, Cash App, cryptocurrencies, you never know what's next. It's hard, but again, I think that's the job of fraud, right? Always
Absolutely.
keep running.
And Steve, what trends are you thinking that we should be preparing for that will emerge in 2026?
Well, I've got three things that I think are going to continue to happen, two of which will be, shared across multiple industries. First of all, in my space in the telecommunications world, I've got a billion new lines that are going to be activated across multiple regions of the world. What does that mean here? It means they're going to come to the United States, or the fraudsters will be here in the United States, stealing more devices. A billion new lines of service between now and 2030 is going to equate to around 10 million demand for 10 million additional devices obtained fraudulently. Let's remember that the arbitrage piece is only one component of what's driving this. There's also tax evasion from paying value-added taxes, export taxes, tariffs, as well as exchange fees. So that's the first piece that's got me concerned, is that demand. Second is, and this is more of a fear, is the continued resistance to that info sharing across the banks, across, I can't give certain information because of what we refer to as CPNI, consumer proprietary network information, that I can't share with the bankers to know that, hey, I can't talk to you about where someone was when they sent an SMS or responded, things like that. And I think the third piece, and this is probably more of a social issue, is the increase in recruiting of insiders. The more and more we have people on the inside who are used as tools to help these fraudsters bypass the controls, we've got more of a concern. And as work is being shifted to contractors and consultants and folks offshore, then you also have a jurisdictional issue. If someone is offshore and they are doing something, who is the law enforcement agency you go to have that person arrested for participating in a fraud? These are things that I think are going to drive us more this year than ever before.
And I think to add to what Steve said, bots, right? So as agentic AI increases its adoption and usage across organizations, and that's a common theme right now as you talk to everybody. How do you differentiate between a good bot and a bad bot? You'll have agents purchasing on your behalf. How do you make sure that you are validating the machines that are behind the humans to be able to combat bad behavior? I think in my mind, with the usage of agentic AI to increase efficiency, it is going to be very interesting to see how do we enforce monitoring around those, how do we increase our governance, and to Steve's points earlier, watch regulatory landscape around all of these emerging technology improvements.
Great.
Can I go back to something Steve said that I did not mention?
Yeah.
This scares so bad. Steve, thank you for bringing this up. I attended a presentation, which was a company that, not the one I work for, totally different company. What they presented was the number of interviews they did. So they were hiring, they had open positions, they had interviewed people, and what they found was they were in those interviews detecting that it was actually deep fake and that it wasn't real people interviewing for positions at their company, and the positions that they were applying for were things that scared me, quite frankly. And so this is a thing that's happening in just in the world where.
So Candace, I have experienced this personally. So
this
we
is so scary to me. Please tell me. This
Yeah,
freaks
so
me out.
we outsourced the hiring of some of our full timers to an agency, and then the agency calls me the other day and says, "Hey, Ruchira, this interview is cancelled." And I'm like, "Why? What happened?" Because he's like, "Oh, when our staffing company was interviewing them, they basically figured out that this was a guy sitting in North Korea trying to interview for this role." And I did not interview the candidate per se, but then my staffing agency informed me of this exact same situation, that this happened, and the interview schedule on my calendar got cancelled.
Yeah,
Wild.
and so now we're saying, like, for my team, full stop. You need an in-person interview. I don't
In
care.
person, yes, that is the only way to do this.
And that's what
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying. Like,
mean,
there is going to be more in-person stuff, more relationship building, more face-to-face. Like, I think about our advisors, I think about our staff. Like, there has to be some more human elements, or actually, this is counterintuitive, going to be a way where some of this AI stuff is not as successful. And we've gotten so reliant on technology to make our life easier. We have to actually make sure we're putting human elements in to make sure that, like, we're just not, like, we can't hire this stuff. It's just crazy to me.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
I
can.
would say
Well,
this.
Well,
go
really
ahead,
quick,
Emily.
I do want to make sure, because you guys are bringing up such amazing knowledge nuggets throughout this entire session we're having, as well as scaring me a little bit towards the end, which is always it's good about fraud, but it's important things that we're discussing. But I want to make sure that we can get at least one parting word of advice from each of you, because we're talking about some serious subjects, and these are all things, everything that we're touching on it's real risk, it's real fraud that's happening right here, present and now. So for everybody who's on the call today, if you could give one piece of parting advice to them and how they can best prepare against all the risk and fraud that's happening to prepare themselves and their teams in 2026. I know that's a heavy ask, but what would that be? And I will pause to see who would like to go first on that, because it's a big ask.
I'll jump in. I'm not afraid.
Let's go, Steve.
So I think that we need to do more, trust but verify. Okay, and I'm going to make a plug here for Mitek, in that if you are having an employment situation or have a question with the customer, ask for multiple documents. Add that additional friction to make sure that you're not going to make a costly mistake. In the case, Candace, you were talking about, what do you do with the employee and having that physical connection to someone who might be across the country from you. And if you don't have a branch, maybe you're going to have to figure out how to go and either visit them or have them visit you, because an airline ticket and an overnight stay in a hotel is a whole lot less costly than finding out that you hired a bot out of North Korea.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I think we're at. We want to make sure that we get the right people and the right technology in place and use every tool that we have available to us to be able to match that. And I think that, taking a little step out in a world where people are being more virtual, we still have to add those physical elements to it. So that's what I'm going to give you, Emily.
Great tip. Thank you, Steve. That was wonderful. Rashira, you look ready to go. Can we
Yeah, I think
have your advice?
I would piggyback on Steve on not just trust and verify, but never trust and always verify. That's the core authentication platform that I own, where you are verifying explicitly who's knocking your door always. You make sure you give access to people who only need to get access to things, and you always assume that there's a breach happening, and you're prepared to solve for that. And then last but not the least, continuous learning. You have to continuously learn and find ways to adapt with the ever-changing threat landscape.
Love it. Candace, do you want to bring us home?
Yeah, what I want to do is compliment anyone who joined this session, because my piece of advice would be to stay connected to others in the industry. We might not be able to share specific information, but there's so many problems that we all share and face. And so building your connections, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, even just setting up like a conversation, going to conferences near you if you can, if they're accessible, just webinars, anything that you can access where you can kind of like get these little nuggets and hear. You can always, I'm sure, reach out to any of us afterwards and ask those questions. Building that network of other fraud professionals, other cyber professionals has been so important to me because I can't solve all of mine in isolation. I need to be able to reach out to people and understand what others are doing in the industry. And so I think like that's my biggest piece of advice is if you're facing a problem, you're probably not facing it alone, and you need to find that network of people who can help talk you through it, figure out what the next step is, and really what's the industry standard for that problem.
Love that.
So, Candace, I'm going to piggyback on that, and I'm going to steal an opportunity here to plug the CFCA, Emily.
Great.
CFCA is a nonprofit that is established for the purpose of originally 40 years ago stopping telecommunications fraud, but we've expanded out farther. We have a number of banks. I believe TD is a member, Bank of America is out there, and I encourage everybody, if they want to, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll tell you how to get to the CFCA website and what you can do to find out more. We do have some webinars that we run on a monthly basis to talk about current events, but we also have 3 educational meetings a year at locations around the world, 2 here in the US and usually 1 internationally, where you can see presentations by vendors as well as telecommunications carriers and banks to talk about just that. And in March, we will be at Bank of America's offices in Charlotte, and I believe TD will be there as well, helping to host what I call a science fair. But I think that Candace is absolutely right. Get yourself out there and know. You've got to go to know. That's our motto at the CFCA. And I encourage everybody to find, if it's not the CFCA, find another trade organization that does the same thing.
I love it. Well, I just want to give a massive thank you to the 3 of you. I could listen and talk to you guys and pick your brains for another hour or 2 alone. Just such wonderful dialogue and conversation. You really gave these really robust knowledge nuggets and practical insights that I think all of us can walk away and take action on. So thank you, thank you, thank you. As a reminder to everybody in the audience, a recording of today's webinar will be sent out following the session, as well as a way to contact Mitek if you've got additional questions or thoughts on any of the conversations that we've had today with Steve, Rashira, and Candace. Additionally, as we're talking about staying connected, the next Mitek webinar will be in February. So we keep an eye out for what that will be about. And if you're not already following Mitek Systems on LinkedIn, we definitely encourage you to do so. Thank you to our audience for staying engaged and taking the time out of your day to engage with us in this dialogue. And finally, wishing everybody just a very Merry holiday season, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and wishing you a great rest of the week. Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.